Hi. I'm making this video mostly in response to the media coverage and the intactivist interaction with the media surrounding the most recent Bloodstained Men tour. They're on tour right now. It's in regards to the media coverage of it. Of course, every local paper does a story. I look at these stories, and there's a couple things I notice. The first thing that really bothers me is there's some talk about sexual functions, there's some talk about circumcision being unnecessary, kind of vague, but noticeably absent is the lack of a clear explanation, even a short, clear explanation of the history of American infant circumcision. It is almost never explained that this in fact started as a Victorian-era anti-sex campaign, anti-masturbation, anti-sex campaign, started by the medical field that simply, due to taboo and cultural inertia and self-preservation instinct on the part of the medical field, and several other factors, simply never stopped, and that everything else is a post hoc rationalization. That almost, I don't see it ever come through. Now, is it possible that the reporters are throwing away interview information? It's possible, but I don't think they're doing it. I don't think they're all that evil per se, because I also see this bleed through in intactivist video interviews, even with friendly media, where it just doesn't really get talked about. This is fairly huge because, I have found that particularly when talking to young men, getting to, talking about the origins of it, this was started to deliberately harm you. And it only got popular, really, since the Second World War. But this started deliberately to harm you. That's a huge tool. If you don't tell people that this was started specifically to damage your sexuality, they're completely unanchored. They don't really know how to begin to assess the whole situation, and the discourse becomes completely unanchored, and it sort of implicitly gives more weight to these claims of, oh, well, it has benefits, blah, 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 blah. And then, of course, it's obligatory at the ends of all these articles. The reporter will, of course, give a blurb from the American Academy of Pediatrics or the CDC. Usually they'll read the AAP policy statement from 2012. Benefits outweigh the risks. They probably will not say that it is not enough to recommend routine infant circumcision. It doesn't really matter. It's just, can you imagine? Do they try to cover both sides of the story in regards to female circumcision? We can talk about that in a moment too. But just in general, if they're going to do this, and they are, every single article I have ever seen does, and the most recent article that I saw today, like half the article is devoted to hashing out the claims of medical benefits by the American medical field. It was worse than it usually is. Usually it's just a paragraph. This time it was like half the article. If you know this is going to happen, and it's going to happen, you need to be undermining the credibility of these organizations. That means doing what I just said, which is that the medical field started it to damage the male sexuality. You might talk about the American Medical Association and William Sayre starting it, claiming to cure epilepsy and all these problems, and it's ridiculous. That may be getting into the weeds a bit, but you need to undermine them. Undermine them with that the initial phrase I used. It's deliberately to harm you. And the fact that the American Academy of Pediatrics, the guy on the 2012 task force, Douglas Diekema, wrote a paper on behalf of the American Academy of Pediatrics in 2010 promoting a form of female circumcision as a harm reduction strategy. You don't really need to mention that. It doesn't really matter. They were promoting, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the organization that the writers are going to try to quote, was promoting female circumcision in 2010 for a month or two until the outrage grew to a fever pitch and they retracted it. But you can't take it back. They threw us a bone there that they're not going to be able to take back. I don't like the use of the phrase, I mentioned this before, intactivists will use the phrase, it's unnecessary. Well, no, it's not simply unnecessary. That's like having a tune-up on your car once a year is unnecessary. Ooh, but it might be good. Having your chimney swept once a year, it might not be necessary. Oh, but it might be good. No, circumcision, it was started to harm you, and it is inherently. The ischemic necrosis death of part of the penis is deliberate iatrogenic injury to the penis. It is deliberate inherent harm. You cannot escape this. And don't let the doctors try to out-argue you on this one. There has to be some objective measure of what is harmful, and it is, of course, it's harmful. And of course, if you want to get down into it, FGM has medical benefits. Kankke and Stallings both found an approximate 50% reduction in HIV transmission in circumcised women. Why is this not talked about? If we're going to talk about medical benefits, derail them a little bit. Throw this at them. The desire to have an evidence-based policy of male circumcision and a human rights-based policy against female circumcision is an example of the logical fallacy of special pleading. So, I don't know. I've tried to throw some things out there. In tactivist interactions with the media, we good interaction with the media can be fairly good. A bad interaction with the media can be horrific. Again, I am big on my idea of protesting schools at this point and targeting the parent-child interface where the parents and the children intersect. Schools, churches, boys' sports league games and practices, amusement park gates, public beaches, public parks. My idea there is get in and get out to where the media doesn't necessarily even have access to, but the idea isn't really to reach your audience through the media. The idea is the audience is right there. The cutter parents, the boys themselves, like that is the audience. It relies less on currying media coverage, if you understand what I mean. Media coverage can be okay, but the idea is to become a sort of high impedance where you put out, you agitate, but you don't really take the incoming criticism. You can take constructive criticism, but you don't listen to the gaslighting. You just ignore them. You drive the bulldozers right over top of them. So anyway, the key thing here is the fact that circumcision was started to deliberately harm you. Like, the history is never fully explained. That's the most important point of this video. And undermine the credibility of these medical institutions, maybe by saying they promoted female circumcision in 2010. They have no credibility to be speaking. Those are the main points. I mentioned a couple others. Tell me what you think. The tour isn't over, I don't think, so maybe you guys at Bloodstained Men can use some of these honing strategies in media in relations to squeeze some maximum value out of it. Tell me what you think. Take care. Bye-bye.